What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Bill's Chat Live. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight, as always, is Luka. And Luka, tonight, I know our title is Bill's Chat Live, but we probably need to let the folks know on a little secret going on with us, huh?
This is not live. No.
No, this is not live.
And have a good one, everybody. It's good to see you. No, yeah, of course, you've mentioned it multiple times, both last week on Bill's Chat Live when we were live, and then also on our Bill's Chat podcast. You have to then be with our normal mainstay third man in the chair, Stokes, because he has a wedding that you are attending of his. Exciting times for him. He was even possibly going to be sitting in on this recording we were having tonight, but he has so many wedding duties that he was unable to attend this pre-recorded Bill's Chat Live. So we just felt like it would be right to be upfront and honest. If you're in the chat throughout this premiere episode of Bill's Chat Live recorded on Wednesday, we appreciate you. I will even probably, just spoiler alert, be sitting there to watch. You may see Bill's Chat's YouTube account commenting in the chat to still give it a little bit of a live vibe. If, just have a fun time. But if you are watching this video right now, just understand, yes, we are recording this. Josh is enjoying himself this weekend elsewhere for our guy Stokes. So apologies that this isn't live and it's not going to have that same feel, but we will be back to the live format, Josh, next week. So happy for that, but also happy we could still sit down and give the people something.
Yeah, and when Luka and I started this podcast thing, it was a big deal for us to be upfront and honest about things. We were never going to try to sneak things that, even if we could have easily tried to put this out there, gloss over things, but we want to be upfront with you all. And we know it might hurt the viewership, but we want you to feel like you can trust us. And in general, you can trust that on Friday nights, we are going to be live. This is just a one-off opportunity where I am out of town. Our direct backup is out of town. He's the reason why I'm out of town. So we're putting this episode together. So what you can expect from this episode that you are watching right now is not your normal, okay, here's the final game injury report, because we're recording this on Wednesday night. So all we know right now is Micah Hyde, Leonard Floyd, and Dawson Knox missed practice on Wednesday. And then for the Commanders side of things, Deron Payne missed practice on Wednesday. But we're not going to spend too much time talking about the implications of that, because by the time you're listening to this, you might know directly if those guys are playing or not, and that conversation could be dated. Luka, where I want to start this conversation off, though, is a little bit more big picture, because the Commanders are 2-0, and I think when the schedule came out, it was easy to be like, okay, Sam Howell, he's a day 3 draft pick from last year. He doesn't have a lot of resume in the NFL. This is a game that probably should be fairly easy for the Bills. They're 2-0, not necessarily two great high-quality opponents. The Broncos and the Cardinals, worth mentioning, they had to come back and beat both of those teams too. They were down somewhat significantly in both of those games. But when I look at this matchup, and then when I look what's on the horizon for the Bills, a week 4 matchup with the Dolphins, who are arguably the hottest team in the sport right now, before going overseas and taking on the Jaguars in London, if the Bills were to drop this game, Luka, it could start feeling like a mini panic time if you start projecting ahead a week or two.
Yeah, this is just one of those games. It's not a must-win game, right? You don't want to put that label on it. But this is one of those games that if you are a good team, you must win this game. You must take care of business and move on with your day, because you do have some of those tougher games for their own reasons and their own right. And the reason I say that is because the Jags might be more of a difficult game because you have to fly over to London in order to play your home game against the Jaguars. And then, as you said, the week before, next week, you will be playing the Dolphins, which, yeah, props to them. They are the hottest team. They're the fastest team, that's for sure. And they are kind of the darling of the national media and the national limelight right now. It really feels like, where you're hearing a lot of chatter of, is this going to be a year where we get an old school Super Bowl between the Dolphins and the Cowboys? And it's like, please don't live. Do not let us live in that world. Overall, though, you need to be able to take care of business when you have those quote unquote easier games, Washington, from the outside looking in, is kind of one of those easier games. You should be able to take care of this because you are the Bills. You are a better team. You are supposed to be the better team, and you need to kind of impose your will on Sunday to show that you're the better team so that you can still have that confidence and understanding on what's going on as you then get into the more difficult games, that is hosting the Dolphins and then going over to London to play the Jaguars over in the UK. So you just got to have it. It's not necessarily that must win, got to have it. But yes, you need to impose your will. You need to show that you're the better team and take care of business like better teams do.
Winning this game gives you the ability to split with the Jaguars and Dolphins and still like where you're sitting. You'd be a 3-2 football team coming home to play a Giants team that does not look great right now and in a really strong position to go 4-2. Losing this game makes it almost where you feel like you need to win both games against the Dolphins and the Jaguars, which is just a very tall order. You know, it's funny, Luka, when we looked at this schedule and I kind of just blew off the Commanders because of the quarterback situation. You did tell me that you were higher on Sam Howell than me. So what is it that you liked about him coming into the season? And then what have you seen from Sam Howell now through the first 2 weeks?
Sam Howell to me is kind of he's a mold of a quarterback that I just seem to always have this little bit of intrigue about. He's got a swag and a confidence, and you want your quarterback to be confident in their abilities so that they will still stand in there, make the throws you need to. And honestly, the throw and catch of the weekend last week highlighted what Sam Howell can do, and he hit Terry McLaurin in kind of triple coverage. Essentially, he hit that ball. He put that ball in the absolute perfect spot for then Terry McLaurin to come down with a great catch in his own right through both great safeties for Denver and then also the coverage corner that was attached to him as well. He can make those throws. He can make NFL level throws. He can stand in the pocket. He can move around as well, create opportunities for this offense that he's no slouch. He's like, I would have much rather this game be Carson Wentz if I'm an opposition than Sam Howell, because Sam Howell can actually get you at any time. And you can, if you are a Washington fan, you can at least still feel like you're still in a game, as he's already shown now, where you're down 18 to the Broncos and you were down, I believe, I don't know what the max they were down against the Cardinals was. It wasn't 18 points, I can tell you that, but you were still down late, and you can trust him to drive down the field effectively and make plays in order for you to come out on top. So Sam Howell is just a guy that has confidence in himself. He understands what he can and cannot do. Sometimes maybe he forgets what he cannot do, and maybe that's just the gunslinger attitude that he has at times. I like that personally. I think you just got to have that mentality sometimes. We see it obviously in spades with Josh Allen to a point where it's an absolute fault that we're not happy about it. But you just got to live with that double-edged sword. If you have a guy that's willing to stand in there and hit dimes, sometimes he's just going to see it wrong, and unfortunately, it's going to lead to turnovers. For Sam Howell, though, he doesn't have a Josh Allen arm or anything like that, so it just comes a little bit more often. But overall, Sam Howell, at one point when he was in college at UNC, North Carolina, he was talked about as a day one, day two guy. He fell a little bit for a couple things, but he still kind of has this hidden gem kind of feel to him for Washington. So if you're a Washington fan, you should be excited about the potential future with this guy, because he right now in his kind of small sample size has kind of looked the part, where he is definitely a middle of the road quarterback at this point in time with a ceiling to be had. So it's exciting times if you're a Washington fan kind of looking at Sam Howell, because he's definitely something. He's not nothing. That's he is something to watch moving forward if you're even an NFL fan.
So it's interesting because Dan Orlovsky was on One Bills Live this week, and he made the point that Sam Howell, for only being 6'1", 220, you think of those guys as kind of being like game managers and not having the strongest arm. He's like, look, he's not Josh Allen as far as arm strength goes, but he might be in the next tier, which is interesting. And then they do have weapons to throw the ball to. You mentioned Terry McLaurin. Dotson is a first-round pick at receiver. Curtis Samuel has been no slouch in this league. And then they have a couple of running backs. Brian Robinson is off to a fantastic start this season. And then Antonio Gibson is at least an intriguing athlete, never really put it together at the NFL level. And I'm looking at some of his advanced stats for Sam Howell, and it looks like he has only been under pressure 16 times of 70 dropbacks. That doesn't seem too bad, but his metrics under pressure are horrendous. The other thing I will tell you about Sam Howell that's interesting is he's already been sacked 10 times this season. And when you think about the teams they've gone against, Denver and Arizona, neither one of those defensive lines strike fear into you. Denver has a couple of guys that at one point in time were considered good. I know Frank Clark is there now. But all in all, I think that the Bills are a much better defensive line than what either one of those two teams are trotting out. So I'm encouraged by that. That tells me Sam Howell might be holding onto the ball a little bit too long. And I think that is going to be the biggest key for the Bills is you now have a 2-game sample size on Sam Howell. You have a 2-game sample size on what Eric Bieniemy has been doing with Sam Howell. And the track record of Sean McDermott is when he goes against young quarterbacks, particularly first-year starters at quarterback, he tends to suffocate them a little bit, almost Belichick style. What is your expectation for the Bills defense in this matchup, Luka? And just how many points do you think the Bills need to hold the Commanders to where you would think I'll sign for that number right now?
Hey, Josh, just don't sleep on a Dennis Gardeck. You know, you didn't mention an absolute stud of an edge rusher when it comes to the Cardinals. He got 2 sacks of his own, right? He is, by the way, the number 7 rated pass rusher according to PFF right now in the NFL, above the likes of Chase Young, Zadarius Smith. I'll digress.
I was today years old when I found out that was a real person.
Oh, dude, Dennis Gardeck is a man. If you do not know anyone out there, if you do not know who Dennis Gardeck is, start watching tape. 3 sacks already in this league.
Watch.
What? No, he's awesome.
Don't watch Cardinal games, folks. Just take Luka's word for it.
Anyways, I expect the Bills D-line to absolutely eat in this game. It was one thing when I had the Cardinals Washington game week 1 up in the very high corner of my living room. It was eye-popping on how much pressure in my mind. Like you said, the advanced metrics didn't show it. To me, when I was looking up, it just did seem like maybe it was because Sam Howell was holding onto the ball, so you wouldn't consider that to be pressure anymore as he's moving around. But the pass rush was getting home. Dennis Gardeck, as I just mentioned, had 2 sacks in that game. He was not the only individual with sacks in that game. I mean, Denver, which is a decent defense, although maybe we overrated it a little bit going into this league since this team did put up a lot of points on them. But overall, they were getting home as well in their pass rush, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The Bills have a better D-line than both of those teams, and they were finding it easier at times to get home. I would think your Ed Olivers, your Groots, your Leonard Floyd, if he's playing. Obviously, as we mentioned, this is pre-recorded, so we do not know if he will be playing. Hopefully he is, and he's fine if he is playing. Even your AJ Epinezas, though, should have opportunities to get to Sam Howell and bring him down and not allow him to make the throws that he wants to do, or even not allow him to be comfortable by any stretch of the imagination. And kind of the thing I like about playing Washington in this kind of situation is the Bills also, to me, will no longer kind of take it as lightly because they have seen this team come back against a Denver and also in Arizona. So there is tape that they have watched to understand this team where they have seen them climb back and understand that they're not a team that quits yet. And so therefore you need to still play your 60 minutes. You still need to continue to get home or else you will lose this game potentially. And that just cannot happen. And the matchup, of course, as we're talking about right now, is that pass rush and that defensive line against Washington, because they do not really have anyone of note on their offensive line. It's not the worst offensive line either, but it's just not anything of, note and nothing to be concerned about, or just say that their left side is, covered and you really need to attack the right edge. This is going to be a situation where anyone that's lined up against them should be able to find success. And then also your Matt Milanos and stuff on the whatever blitzing situation may come should also be able to find those gaps and holes in order to cause chaos in their own right. So that is absolutely something I would expect to see on Sunday against this team.
That's where the Micah Hyde injury, and we're not going to dwell on this too much because if you're listening to this, you probably know if he's playing, but that's where that one sticks out to me because the post-snap confusion the Bills can create with Hyde and Poyer out there, where they give you one look and then at the snap of the ball, they give you another look. I saw a chart today where the Bills were in the top 5 of teams that changed the safety alignment post-snap in the league. Interestingly enough, Washington was number 1. I thought that was pretty fascinating. But I think that'd be a good way to kind of get in the head of Sam Howell and make him question what he's seeing post snap and really test that. You talked about the defensive line, Luka, and that really is where the bread is buttered on this team. It is what makes me concerned about this matchup, because when you talk about 4 starters on a defensive line, they don't have anybody on their defense that I would say is considered the best in the sport, but they have 4 guys that could all contend for a Pro Bowl, and 4 guys that all could make second team All Pro, and you wouldn't necessarily blink at it when you're talking about Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Montez Sweat. And last week, the Bills got a lot of credit for shutting out Max Crosby. Spencer Brown got a lot of credit for shutting out Max Crosby. But the difference is when Chandler Jones essentially went AWOL, the Raiders were left with Max Crosby and a group of just a guys where you don't really have to scheme for them. This Jets defense to me much more resembles, or this Commanders defense much more resembles the Jets defense they saw week 1, where you kind of have to pick your poison on offense. And I don't think it's going to be as simple as like, okay, we know who the Batman is on this defensive line. It's Max Crosby. We're going to chip. We're going to leave tight ends in. That's going to be our focus. The Bills really are going to have everybody play their A game up front, because you can't double team everybody. You're going to have to kind of pick your spots, as this is a big Dorsey week. And I do think that presents kind of a unique challenge where this offensive line is going to be tested much more so than they were last week, where Josh Allen was just kept very, very clean.
Yeah, I mean, just to even highlight a matchup that I am very concerned about, it is Spencer Brown on Montez Sweat. That is a mismatch and a half, if you ask me. I feel like Spencer Brown is much more willing and accepting to handling a power type or just a more physical presence type of an edge defender. And Montez Sweat is, I mean, he's not small, but he is a very athletic, very quick off the snap kind of guy, where he is going to try to create an edge off of you time after time after time. And he creates chaos in such a way with his length and speed and size and everything. I mean, Montez Sweat is an absolute beast in my mind. It's, if you had to choose, if you're a Washington person and you're only allowed to keep one between Chase Young, who of course had an incredible rookie year, but kind of has fallen off just a little bit, although it seems like he's having a good start to his season this year, and Montez Sweat, I think a vast majority of Washington fans would side with your Montez Sweat. So now you have him lined up on probably the worst lineman on the Bills side, and that side concerns me. So I agree with you 100%. This is a Ken Dorsey game where scheme and offensive game plan needs to overcome something like that, something of these mismatches where, yes, I believe their defensive line at full health, honestly, is just much better than what we can put on the offensive line, what we can do and handle. I think they can hold their own for the most part, but overall, I would not be surprised if they're getting home a little bit more than you would like to see. And come Sunday, when we're watching the game, and I know you obviously live tweet, you do your halftime and stuff, it would not surprise me at all to see a lot of panic out there, because Josh Allen is finding himself kind of being swarmed by Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, even from the inside, so on and so forth. Jonathan Allen also, just, I almost used him as an afterthought, and he's the 13th ranked interior defender right now in PFF. It's like they are loaded up there. It could be chaotic. So we need to see Dorsey kind of shine with a plan to try to neutralize that as best he can. And then also just move past that, where it's no longer in Allen's hand, for 2, 3, 4 seconds after the snap. He's getting it out quick, whether it's over the air, in the air, or if it's just through the run. We saw obviously the run kind of excel a little bit outside of Josh Allen last week against the Raiders. Let's see if we can, duplicate that in Washington against this defense, that I think that could also be had, even with as impressive of a defensive line as they have. They are good run defenders on the edge. I think it's just still something you might need to do in order to kind of neutralize the pass rush when Josh Allen does need to be back there hitting throws on your occasional 3rd and longs and so on, because you want to try to expose that kind of weak secondary that they have, because that's essentially what their game plan is defensively. They need their pass rush to get home. They need those 4 up front to do their job, because everyone behind them, for the most part, outside of Fuller, who's been okay for them, is kind of suspect. And there is a lot of opportunity to be had down the field.
That is the key point to me, if the offensive line can hold up, the Bills should be able to do whatever they want to this defense, because Davis and Barton are good linebackers, but they're a little bit more throwback linebackers where they like to blitz. They're good in the run game, but man, they can be exposed in coverage. And if Dawson Knox is able to go, he missed practice on Wednesday. There's not been any indication from the team that you would think he's at risk of missing this game yet, but more on Friday. If Kincaid and Knox are able to run the 12 personnel game, I think these guys have a shot to have a real big game. And then they have a rookie cornerback in Emmanuel Forbes, who is a good prospect, but you're talking about his third start of his career. And when the Bills spread you out, he's going to be lined up on Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs. And their safeties are not great coverage safeties. So it really does come down to, if you can withstand the pass rush, this Bills offense should be able to find chunk yardage. But last week, Luka, we saw the Bills lean into the running game. James Cook had his career best game, and he was also involved as a pass catcher. Do you think that's something the Bills can find success with against Washington? And do you think that running a pass rush focused defensive line out of just pinning their ears back is the sound strategy for the Bills in this one?
Yeah, you got to be creative with your running, though, on this team. If you look across it with a lot of different things and variables and kind of metrics, you can see that they aren't exactly the best run defending team. I mean, they have a linebacker, for instance. We use PFF obviously as kind of just to give you a metric, just to give you an understanding of what they are good, not good at, and stuff like that. Cody Barton, like you said, a real throwback linebacker, pass rush grade 71, run defending grade 36. He's not exactly in there to kind of hold his gap assignments and defend the run. He's kind of that guy who on snap shoots a gap and hopefully it's the correct one kind of deal. And that's obviously something that you would find more benefits in a pass rush than you would in run defending, because you need to be kind of patient and understand your lane in order to kind of contain everything. So it's what I find fascinating with the Washington team is it does feel like they're a team built on length and athleticism, and they actually should be a pretty good run defending team. It just seems like maybe because of coaching, maybe because of play calling, whatever it might be, or just for the types of individuals they are, even though they might be built in a certain way, they just aren't willing to tackle in the open field. And they're not willing to get down and kind of pursue the runner in the run game overall. That fascinates me a little bit, but overall, yeah, you got to be creative with that and not just show them the same thing. Maybe not do the same, as I called it, BA halfback delay 8 times in a game to James Cook. You got to just be a little bit more creative in the run game to ultimately, not allow that defensive line to feel like they can just pin their ears back and take those risks of opportunity to get at the passer, because you're only running the same thing like on a delay as well. Maybe that pass rush, if they're thinking that, just still gets home because your offensive line is a little bit of a spread out situation to give them those opportunities as well. It's just going to be an interesting situation to see if they continue this momentum with James Cook or even a Latavius Murray, a bigger individual, to still pound out some yards to ultimately keep the defense and the defensive line honest, so that they can't just feel okay with pinning ears back, rushing the passer, and living with the consequences if we're not passing ourselves.
Yeah, and they haven't been overly strong against the run. They're 4.4 yards against. And again, this is Denver and Arizona. And I know Javonte Williams and James Conner are good players, but it's not like that they're running behind elite offensive lines. So I do think there's some room to gain here for the Bills. All right, Luka. Well, the spread on this game is 6.5. And I will tell you that caught me off guard. I thought with the Commanders being 2-0, with the Bills clearly struggling, with a defense that at least up front is shaped a lot like the Commanders with the Jets in week 1, and it being in Washington, I thought this one would be a little bit closer to like 2 or 3 for the Bills, where, okay, if it's in Buffalo, maybe the Bills are closer to like 6 or 7 point favorites. 6.5 points on the road is a very, very strong number to me. What do you think about that number? And what is your early week read on how Vegas is viewing that number right now?
I can tell you the public loves the Bills. I can tell you that. That's the first and foremost, the first thing that comes to my mind. So, like, for instance, with it at 6.5, one of the things we look at, or I look at when it comes to green lines, Bills 84% cash, 79% tickets. money line 94% in the Bills, 92% of the tickets. That's a lot of money and a lot of things on the Bills. I could easily see, as we're talking about this, Josh, that it's at an even 7 or 7.5, the worst line in football. I do. It's interesting because it's almost like I felt like the Bills are that team where they were awful, obviously, to open the season on Monday night. And you would have thought there would have been kind of an overreaction line adjustment to that when they played the Raiders. There really wasn't. It sat at 8.5 and 9. And now that they took care of business the way they did, even though Washington is 2-0, clearly what that line tells me is Vegas doesn't believe in Washington. That's what that line tells me. For the Bills to be a 9.5 point favorite on neutral field, obviously they give them that field goal in a traditional sense to make it 6.5. I do think that this is a kind of the situation where Vegas is not respecting Washington, even though they are a 2-0 team, and they are still thinking that the Bills are far and away the better team and expect this to be a 2-score game overall. And therefore, that's why you find it at that 6.5. It's an interesting one. What I will say is this. I am really finding it interesting that money is coming in more and more on the under, to the point where at 43.5, that feels like a low number to me. And that's the one that I find intriguing overall. If we wanted to talk betting and I wanted to talk about something that I like in this game, 43.5 seems like a fascinating number, because if the game gets out of hand when it comes to the Bills maybe jumping out early, that's actually where I think maybe the under comes into play, because then Washington folds it in, but they haven't shown us that they've done that yet. So overall, if Buffalo jumps out on top early, 43.5 should be hit in spades, because the Bills are going to have to continue to do their thing, and Washington's just going to open it up overall. And 43.5 is too low for a game that kind of plays out in that way.
And that's so fascinating if the Bills jump out early, because the Bills have jumped out early in both games. They've had double-digit leads in both of these games at halftime. And the Commanders have been the direct opposite. They trailed by 6 to the Cardinals, not terrible, but then you mentioned it was 18 to the Broncos last week, and they've proven they can come back. I imagine the message inside One Bills Drive this week to Josh Allen is, I don't care what the scoreboard says. I don't care what the situation is. We have to be smart with the football and not repeat what happened against the Jets. All right, Luka. Well, it's early in the week. I hate to hold us to these predictions just because there's so much more research to do, but we're going to make predictions. You know, we're not going to shy away from it. And I feel different about this game than I did before the season started, I will tell you. But I still feel pretty confident in how I feel this game's going to go. You did mention the halftime show. I want to let folks know there is a very good chance I will be driving back during this game, and a very good chance I will not be going live for the halftime show. I'll be watching the game on Sunday Ticket on my phone, which I'm not overly excited about, but hey, it is what it is. You got to do what you got to do for your friends. But all right, Luka, the 2-2 Washington Commanders, 6.5 point underdogs at home to our 1-1 Buffalo Bills. What's your early read on how you think this is going to go down?
Man, you think Washington is losing the next two to already project them 2-2? You said
I say 2-2. Man. Okay, we'll edit that out. We won't edit it out. It's gonna
no,
be
we won't.
Here.
No, this is just gonna be posted.
Yep.
I do respect Washington. I think I respect Washington a little bit more than the public does. With that in mind, though, I think this is finally kind of one of those games where when a team is kind of outplaying what they should, when a team is kind of doing things above expectation early on in the season, this is that reality check game. This is, and I'm not saying it's going to be an absolute thrashing. I could actually see this kind of being an ugly game a little bit early. I could see one where the Bills are driving, having sustained drives, maybe have to settle for a field goal while also having a touchdown in there. And then Washington somehow finds, Terry McLaurin up over top. I think Sam Howell can hit Terry at any point in time above our defense. I think that is absolutely a reality I see. But overall, then I would expect kind of the class of the Bills to show itself later on as the game progresses. I'm going to stick with my prediction. I actually love it. I expected this to be a 46 to 48.5 kind of over under game. And I'm going to stick with that. I predicted in our prediction show a win for the Bills, 34-15. And that number, just for whatever reason, feels very good to me. So I'm going to stick with it, Josh. I'm even at this point in time, we are recording on Wednesday evening. Everyone is enjoying this Friday or later. I actually think the Bills will win this game 34-15. That number and that score line just feels right.
Yeah, I understand that. That makes sense to me. And I will tell you, the skins are skins. Woo! The Commanders are they're 2-0. You can't take that away from them. But when you look under the hood, it's a lot of the same criticism I have about the Jaguars from last season. I look at it and I'm like, okay, you're 2-0. That's great. You came back and won. But at one point in the second half, you were down by 6 to the Cardinals, who are all but openly tanking, although they had a huge lead last week as well. So maybe they're just better in the first half than we give them credit for. And you were down by 18 to the Broncos, who can't get out of their own way. And early in that game, that Broncos offense looked functional, which is something they have not looked in about a year and a half. So I wonder, how does that happen? And obviously, the Broncos and the Cardinals are not good football teams. They found a way to let the Commanders back in. The Commanders ultimately won the game. And where I'm going with that is, I do agree with you. I think this one could be dicey early. I expect that field, that stadium, to be a raucous crowd. They are sold out. They're excited about their 2-0 football team. They're excited about their young quarterback. And they're excited that a fishbowl team, a marquee team, is coming to their stadium, and they're going to see if they can put them down. But the reality of the situation is the Bills are better top to bottom than this team. They have a good defensive line. They have some good weapons. But overall, the Bills are a much better football team. The Bills have a much more established quarterback. All respect to Sam Howell. He has a long way to go, but this is the kind of game that if the Bills are going to where we think they should be going this year, you have to win this game. And, we saw week 1, they struggled. Week 2, it was chef's kiss. Now it's time for the Bills, if they're a championship level team, to prove they can take the show on the road. They're on the road this week. I expect Josh Allen to have another efficient game, and I like the Bills 31-17. I do think it'll be a little bit dicey early, but ultimately I kind of expect this to be a cream rises to the top situation. And by the end of the game, there's not much doubt about which team is better, but we're also like, okay, I'm good on seeing that defensive line for a while. All right, Luka. So we've given our predictions. We both have the Bills winning. We both have the Bills covering the spread. I want to talk about the other teams that are kind of in the AFC East right now, because we came into this season thinking, man, the AFC East is going to be a gauntlet. The Jets have Aaron Rodgers. The Patriots, that you never count out the Patriots. And the Dolphins, if they can stay healthy, are a handful. Well, I feel like one of those three things is true, and it's only week 3. All due respect to the Jets, who, to their credit, have beaten the Bills already. And that's going to be on the Bills' resume all season long. I am ready to write off the Jets. I don't think in 2023 you can win when you can't run a functional offense, and that's what they are living with right now with Zach Wilson. What is your week 3 state of the AFC East? How much do you fear what you're seeing with the Dolphins? We can start there. And then after that, maybe we can get into just the division as a whole. Let's start with the Dolphins. What's your fear factor level with the Dolphins, and has it changed since the season started?
So since the season started, absolutely. I fear the Dolphins way more than what I was at when we were doing our Rivals Watch AFC East, and then also when we were doing our season predictions. I mean, and I say that when I also have in my season prediction notes, I had the Bills losing to the Dolphins in week 4 when they come to town into Orchard Park. It's just the Dolphins look to me right now a team that has, when you have the timing that they do on offense down to such perfection, it's scary because on McAfee show, if you're listening to this one more time, if you haven't realized, we are recording this on Wednesday. On McAfee show on Wednesday, Chris Carter was on actually as a guest, and they were talking about Miami, and they were talking about Tyreek Hill and how the speed of Tyreek Hill and just how fast he goes through his routes and does what he does. It's what makes Tua's play even more impressive when they are doing these timing routes and have situations where Tua has to understand exactly the moment when he needs to release that ball to hit Tyreek at 15 yards in the seam or whatever it might be. it's what makes this entire offense and that team very, very scary, that those things are happening perfectly. It's seamless. It's almost as if we're mid-season form right now. So with the Dolphins, especially when it comes to, week 4, very, very worried. And with the division, yeah, there's way more concern with the division now than there was to begin the year, because they look like they're maintaining a good health. They look like everything's going great. We have to see where things go, but everything's going great for them. When it comes to the other two, I'm going to just say this. Yes, I think the Jets are dead in the water. They need to just do something else with Zach Wilson. Yeah, they need to do something else at quarterback, because Zach Wilson just isn't it. I think it's done and dusted. I think this is going to be an unfortunate game they're going to deal with on Sunday with New England coming to town. But then I'll transition into New England here. I think New England has kind of been hard done. They've had a very difficult start to their season. They hosted the Eagles and then hosted the Dolphins, of course. This is going to feel like a breath of fresh air, I think, to them. And playing the Jets, I think we're going to see kind of the good side of New England, because when you've watched the game, like, they didn't go away against Miami. They didn't go away against Philadelphia, with both games actually having kind of the opportunity for them to kind of fold and pack up shop. And they never did. They actually were a pretty impressive team in my mind, where they hung in. They had opportunities there all the way up until the very end of the game. That New England, I'm not worried about them. I'm not concerned about them when it comes to the division, but they can get you any day. They can absolutely still be well coached and ready to go week to week. So whenever you have to play them, if you're the Bills later on in the season, if they get things going a little bit more, if they rack up a couple wins and have some kind of confidence in the team and what's going on, they can be a scary team whenever they come to town and whenever you have to go play them. So New England, to me, even though they're 0-2, I'm actually, in a weird way, a little bit more impressed than I even already thought I would be at this point in time with New England. And just to remind everyone, I had it. One of my best bets when it comes to futures was New England at one point was over under win total on the season at 6.5. And I thought that was outrageous. Like, that's way too low. I said that was one of the better futures that was out there. I think it moved up to 7.5 right before the start of the season. I had them at 9 wins. I think that's really what they are going to be. And it's surprising to say that, being that they're 0-2, because that now means, Josh, that they would actually have to go 9-6 throughout the rest of the year. And I could absolutely see that happening.
I wonder if it's dipped since they started 0-2 also.
Yeah, good point. Good
so,
point.
I mean, you could even get better odds on that. So I will say, I agree with what you're saying, first of all, about the Dolphins. And I think we've been pretty consistent on this. If they're healthy, they don't have to take a backseat to anybody. I think they can punch with anybody in the conference. That includes the Bills. That includes the Bengals. That includes the Ravens. That includes the Chiefs, in my opinion. The way they're the way that they're formulated is they can score quickly, and I don't think they have a great defense, but they have a very good defensive line. And when Jalen Phillips and Christian Wilkins and Bradley Chubb are all healthy, they have the ability to close out a game. And it reminds me kind of like the Greatest Show on Turf Rams, where the offense is a nightmare. It feels like they have 13 players out there against your 11 with how much speed they have. And they have a quarterback who, while I'm not calling Tua Kurt Warner, it's the same principle. It's just the ball is out so quickly, and they know exactly where their spots are, and their receivers, just you give them an inch and they can take a mile as far as taking it to the house, like you saw with the Rams with Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Oz Hakeem. A lot of similarities there. Not ready to call Raheem Mostert Marshall Faulk, but he also is a very fast player. So I think the Dolphins, if they stay healthy, are going to be in this in the long run with the Bills, and it's going to come down to a photo finish, hopefully, if the Bills can keep pace. But where I'm optimistic is when I started looking at the standings before the season, I was thinking to myself, man, if the Bills, for whatever reason, don't win the AFC East, the path to the playoffs is so tricky, because the AFC East is going to be a dogfight. We play the NFC East, and then there's 3 or 4 really good teams in the AFC North. There's 3 maybe good teams in the AFC West if Sean Payton can turn the Broncos around. The Titans probably aren't going to go away. But what we've seen so far is the Patriots are 0-2. And I know I agree with everything you said, but I don't necessarily project them to win enough games to make the playoffs, take one of those wild card spots. I wouldn't say the same thing for Zach Wilson and the Jets. I just can't see them winning enough games 17-14 to really pile up enough wins with the schedule they have. Kenny Pickett has been horrendous, and the Steelers were a darling team because they played so well in the preseason. And it's like, it's amazing that so many Bills fans bought into that when just a few short years ago, we saw Nathan Peterman look great in the preseason, and how soon we forget how meaningless August football really is. The Browns, you've been talking about them for 2 years, how loaded their roster is. Their roster is absolutely loaded, but two major things have happened since the season started. One, probably their best offensive player, Nick Chubb, is out for the season in an absolutely horrendous injury. And two, Deshaun Watson does not look good at all. He's almost objectively bad. And they're almost a team not as bad as the Jets, but you're really starting to wonder, can you sustain success with a quarterback that is holding you back? So you just start checking off teams off the list. The Chargers are 0-2. The Bengals are 0-2. I'm not nearly ready enough to write either one of those two teams off, but the losses are piling up. And I'm starting to think to myself, okay, well, even if the Bills don't win the AFC East, it sure seems like that they will be good enough to get one of those top 7 spots in the conference, get to the playoffs, see what happens. And maybe the Bills not playing in Buffalo in the playoffs could be a good thing when you factor in weather. Like, do you want this Bills team playing in the wind and the monsoons and potentially, negative 10 degrees in Buffalo? Or do you want them going down to Jacksonville where it's probably 60, 70 degrees and a nice calm day? So I can wrap my head around that and get excited about that. So overall, Luka, my thought is very scary about the Dolphins. We'll see if they can sustain it. But overall, I'm much more optimistic that the Bills will not find themselves on the outside looking in as far as the playoffs go.
Yeah, if we're gonna have a quick discussion about playoffs, even sitting here in a pregame of week 3, the early take on the AFC is, I mean, yeah, you have the Chargers, a darling to a lot of teams or a lot of people, kind of fighting for their lives in Minnesota Sunday, and then you have, as you mentioned, Cleveland, who, yeah, and Deshaun Watson does not look good, and then of course the Nick Chubb thing is big, although they brought back a kind of a good old friend in Kareem Hunt. How crazy that whole situation worked out. That is wild to me. It's funny in a way. I still won't write off the Browns, but they're playing the Titans, a team that a lot of people didn't think would be around, but they absolutely could be. And it's kind of one of those things where I think the dust is settling a little bit on teams where we expected them to be there due to unfortunate circumstances like the Jets, because no more Rodgers or things like that. And yeah, even as I said, 9 wins for the Patriots. That's what I believe their ceiling to be, and 9 wins is not good enough to make the playoffs anymore, I don't believe. I mean, that's basically just over 500. Yeah, the Steelers thing too, as you brought up them, not to get shots in here, but it's like, if their defense basically doesn't score 2 touchdowns for them, they are not going to be in games. Like the Browns absolutely should have won that game. They just unfortunately handed 14 points to the Steelers. It's like, if it, there are other teams that people thought would be around, and it's like, no, you forget this is how football works. Like, it just doesn't work that way. They're not good enough, things like that. Denver, everyone thought, oh, maybe they can finally do it with Sean Payton. Unfortunately, no, although hopefully they can do it this Sunday when they have to go to Miami. Just fingers crossed on that one. That would be wild. Which also, real quick, we talked about the Bills line plus Washington's plus 6.5 at home to the Bills. Miami's only a 6.5 point favorite against Denver at home. I find that very odd.
Yeah.
To me, that is Vegas not respecting Miami at all. I don't get that. That one is very, very strange. And also, on top of that, the money on at least what I'm looking at on this one green line thing shows 64% Denver plus 6.5. Very, very odd. Don't know what we're getting at here. What do people know that we don't? I don't know. But overall, it will be this year to me feels like one of those years that could really shake out in a fun, different way. And hopefully the Bills aren't at a cost of that. Like, I think Kansas City is still going to be Kansas City. I think the Bills hopefully should still be the Bills. I think the Ravens are emerging as kind of one of those a back again teams. And then if I'm a Bengals fan, I'd be worried because Burrow's health is a serious concern.
It really
I think
is.
The Chargers are going to be weighed down to the bottom of the ocean thanks to Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley, you suck. One more time, let me just say it for the people in the back. And it's just going to be one of those ones where, yeah, it seemed like it was going to be a gauntlet in the AFC, and it seemed like it was going to be a gauntlet in the division for the Bills. But maybe as the dust is settling, injuries are piling up for some teams, unfortunately, and stuff's happening. the path to the playoffs seems a little bit more clear as long as the Bills take care of business and do what they need to do. At the end of the day, you have to take care of your job first and let everything else happen. And that Jets loss on Monday night to start the season will be long distant in the rear view mirror as they hopefully take care of business down the road and get into the postseason wherever they may, and then make a run from there as all the other teams unfortunately kind of fall off a little bit.
Yeah, the Chargers, so they have the Vikings this week, and boy, if they lose that one, 2 of their next 3 games are against the Cowboys and the Chiefs. That,
Yep.
I mean, oof, look out, because I mean, the Chiefs in Arrowhead, they don't have to take a backseat to anybody, and the
Brandon Staley
Cowboys,
could be fired week 5 when
he
they're on a
could.
bye.
I was just trying to figure out when their bye was.
Week
They
5.
do get a reprieve next week where they play the Raiders, but even if they go into their bye week 1-3, is ownership going to be overly excited about that? I kind of doubt it. So, we have Justin Herbert. We have this guy we just paid the bank to, and I expect more than 1-3 when you look at the fact that we've played Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy Garoppolo in 2 of our 4 games at that point in time. So, all right, Luka, let's clean up a little bit of what people can expect from us this weekend. Probably not going to be a halftime show. There will be, well, if you're watching this on Friday, there was a Madden 24 franchise coming up. What's going to happen with Luka's locks this weekend?
So Luka's locks will still happen. It won't be part of this show, obviously, as we wrap up this show. This is not live. For anyone that's joining us now at this point in time, we are not live. We apologize, but please feel free to go back to the beginning, watch this whole video. We kind of give a nice broad view here, but Luka's locks will be posted. I will do kind of my own thing. I still need to kind of hone in on a couple things. These lines are interesting. They're moving in weird ways. Also, that the Denver Miami one is really where it's got my head scratching. I'll be honest. I've looked at it to this point now here on Wednesday night, and I still don't quite get it. But overall, I will post my own Luka's locks. I will also kind of obviously post it through our social medias and everything. And then we will promote it as always. It will probably be sent out on Friday following this premiered pre-recording of Bill's Chat Live. And hopefully you all tell, because last week we did finish 3-0 and 0. Technically, there were no pushes. That puts us in a positive unit scale if you've been following along. It was a hell of a bounce back, and it was almost, there was no sweating, Josh. We won those 3 with ease. The closest one was the Bengals making a late push on the Ravens, but since we had that +3 with the Ravens, which again, I get it with at Cincinnati, but it felt pretty good to me. The Colts, even without their starter, walked away with a win. And then the over in the Seattle, there was a brief moment where I was like, man, is this game really going to hit the over? I think it stalled out in the second quarter, but boy, did that second half reward us. And Seahawks, Lions, each team almost hit that over on their own. So overall, didn't sweat it whatsoever. And we will be back. If you're watching this now on Friday, you should hopefully see Luka's Locks post shortly after this. Or notice it Saturday morning, both on our Twitter at Bills Chat Pod, but then also on the Built in Buffalo YouTube and or the Bills Chat YouTube to get your betting locks for the Week 3 NFL slate. Hopefully you tail along, because I seem to be seeing the field a little bit, Josh. I think I'm understanding this whole NFL thing and this NFL sports betting thing. I think I got a little bit of a lock on it. Hopefully I'm not jinxing myself, knock on wood. But,
so you're feeling yourself after going 3-0 last week, and just don't bet your life savings this week.
Yeah,
I don't need you going broke.
Be responsible, bet responsible,
bet
people.
responsible.
Unit scale, it's a big thing.
One last thing on that Dolphins. I wonder if that's Vegas thinking Jalen Waddle won't play. It is Wednesday. He didn't practice this today. He's in concussion protocol. I think by the time Thursday rolls around, if he's still in concussion protocol, that's probably not a good sign. And quite honestly, if you're Miami, do you want to rush Jalen Waddle back for the Broncos? I think you could probably just throw Cedric Wilson out there and be fine. But maybe Vegas is thinking that Jalen Waddle isn't going to play. That's all I could really think of, honestly, with that, because that line just screams to me, take the Dolphins, which if the line screams that to you, chances are they know something you don't, because I thought last week the line screamed, oh, wow, the Bengals are only 3. And sure enough, the Bengals lost that game. You're all over it. All right. Well, Luka and I will be back on Monday morning, bright and early, breaking down everything that took place in the Bills Commanders matchup. Hopefully we are talking about a 2-1 Buffalo Bills team that is getting ready for a mega showdown the following Sunday in the AFC East with the Miami Dolphins, who will all likelihood be 3-0. And for Luka, I am Josh McCarty. Congratulations again to Stokes. He is getting married on Saturday. I do have some plans to maybe make a quick video with Stokes as we sit back in the groomsmen room and post it to our various social media. And you guys know me well enough. It will not be about his wedding. I will get some football pics out of him, even on one of his most important days of his life. But for Luka, I never going to happen for me, Luke. It's just never going to happen. I just need to put your picture over here, and then it's easy. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. I hope you all have a great weekend. We will talk to you Monday on Bills Chat, and we will be back next week live and every week thereafter live, unless otherwise stated, on Bills Chat Live, and we will see you then.